Thank you so much, Christina. Welcome, everybody. You are here at the YSS Lunch and Learn for the Empire State Award Luncheon in the old normal, right? But greetings from the Empire State Award Committee. My name is Alexandria Abenshawn, or Lex, and I am this year's committee chair. I am so delighted to be sharing this virtual space with you. But before we truly dive into today's program, I have a few brief announcements to get out of the way. And our time is short, so like I said, I'm going to be brief. And our executive board will not be speaking, so it's just me and it's just Rita. You can find all of the information that you need about upcoming awards, scholarships, and the 2021 Spring Conference on our website, which is www.nyla.org/YSS. Please note, though, that we will be giving away our normal awards and scholarships, but the deadline is coming up really soon. It's December 1st. So that is just a few weeks away. And also note that the spring conference will be on March 26th, 2021, and that will also be all virtual. And stay tuned for more information that is forthcoming. Lastly, please consider becoming more involved in YSS. We are looking for folks to run for executive board positions, such as president-elect, Vice President of Membership, or 2023 Spring Conference Director, or for folks to get involved in some of our committees like Marketing, Fall Conference, or the Pied Piper Committee. All of the information about how to do that is on our website and will also be in the next newsletter. Again, you can visit www.nyla.org/YSS for all of your YSS needs. And now some more information about our award. So, first presented to Maurice Sendak in 1990, the Empire State Award is given annually to an author or illustrator currently residing in New York State, acknowledging their significant contribution to the field of literature for young people. Nominations are made by librarians like you across the state, and the winner is selected by a 3-person committee made up this year of myself, Gail J. Brown, and Mallory Marinaro. Please consider submitting a nomination for your favorite author or illustrator by using the online form on the YSS page of the NYLA website. Your input is invaluable, and we look through these nominations and consider them so deeply. But as chair of the 2020 YSS Empire State Award Committee, I am beyond honored and excited to present Rita Williams-Garcia with the 2020 Empire State Award for Excellence in Literature to Young People. When Rita was a child, most of her kindergarten classmates wanted crayons, coloring in pictures on their papers. But Rita wanted a pencil so she could shape stories. By the age of 12, she was sending stories to magazines, only to be rejected. But 2 years later, at the age of just 14, she sold her first story to Highlights, and that was just the start. Rita is the best-selling author of 9 books for middle grade and young adult readers, and is perhaps best known for her Gaither Sisters trilogy. These books remind us of the power of resilience in tumultuous times and challenge us with their questions of personal responsibility and action. The first book in this series, One Crazy Summer, won the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction, the Coretta Scott King Award, a Newbery Honor, and was also a National Book Award finalist. The sequels, PSB 11 and Gone Crazy in Alabama, were also Coretta Scott King Book Award winning titles and round out the stories of these sisters. For readers hungry for even more of Rita's writing, there are stories beyond those of the Gaither sisters, and I encourage you to check out many other titles, including National Book Award finalists Clayton Bird Goes Underground and Jumped. There are so many stories to explore. Rita states that she likes to be excited by the story she's dying to write, and I'm excited to hear the stories she's going to tell us. Without further ado, I am delighted to present to you your 2020 Empire State Award winner, Rita Williams-Garcia. Rita, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. I am truly overwhelmed by this honor, simply because it took quite a road for me to become what I consider a New York writer. And now with that, I'm going to start my presentation. I'm going to try to shorten it a little so that we can have more time to spend with each other. So bear with me while I share the screen. Avert your eyes so that you don't see all of my slides all at once. There we go. Haha. Okay. I actually know what I'm doing. So, Oh, you are sharing your screen. Okay, very good. And why am I not advancing? Okay. What happened? Okay, there we go. We're on our way. Yes. It's not a big secret that I do not prefer to fly when I travel. These days, it's not a whole lot of traveling going on, but I have to tell you that when I did receive this invitation, and that the conference would be held in Saratoga, New York. Oh my goodness, I was really thrilled to take the journey because I knew it would be in the fall, which would mean I'd get to see that beautiful fall foliage. I wouldn't have that feeling of being up in the air with who knows what going on. I think we all know about being up in the air right now. But I was very excited to go to, just to leave the boroughs. I'm from Queens, and to see something and to take walks up or hikes, but also to kind of feed my wait a minute. Are you able to see everything anyway? Let me just move. Whoops, going back. Well, anyway. Okay, I'm going to leave the tech stuff alone and just keep talking. Anyway, so you saw my my previous slide. Yeah, I heard about all the knitting shops and the small shops in Saratoga, and so yeah, that was my other reason why. Oh, I can't wait to get there. But of course, things happen. And so instead we are meeting virtually, but I'm still, the honor is it is no less an honor, and so here we are. Well, as Lex said, I am from Queens. I was born in Queens and spent my early life in Far Rockaway, which is surrounded by water, and we experienced a flood when I was about like 2 years old, and I looked down and I saw people rowing in rowboats instead of driving cars. That's how flooded the streets were, and that became the subject of one of my first stories. But I do recall a lot of my early childhood, and I think it's mainly because I spent it inside my wooden playpen by myself, while my sister and brother, who were 2 and 3, they were on the outside. So I was always kind of separated and to myself. We lived in the projects, the Hamel projects, and we rarely went outside while my mother worked and my father was away in Korea. So where was our sitter? Well, our sitter was my older sister, Rosalind, who was 3 years old. And so Rosalind would give us our sandwiches when Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chops came on TV and wake us. And then we'd have to have our nap. And then we woke up when mommy came home from work. That is a social services alert if ever I heard one. But we're all here. We've survived. But one of the things that my sister did for me was she'd always put a picture book through the slats of my playpen. And I learned to turn the pages and to tell the story. And then it wasn't until much later that I would kind of like look at those pictures, because I had to have that book. So I do have it in my possession. And then I thought to myself, this is kind of creepy. No wonder my sister gave me these books. Anyway, but she did encourage me to follow a story just by looking at the pictures. And then by 2 and 3 years old, I had a little bit of reading recognition. And so I got more and more books. So just having that time by myself, always being kind of looking out at the world, looking out at the antics of my brother and sister, and then being entertained by books. And also Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop and Perry Mason, all of those things kind of began the kernel of love of story and wanting to tell stories. So my father came home from Korea, and so it was time for us to pack up and to move. First, we went south in order to get west, but as we drove south, we were stopped by state police. My father was wearing his uniform while we traveled, and I never could understand. I thought those were the only clothes that my father had, but I understood years later as I reflected why he wore his uniform, and it was for protection for us. But even so, my mother cried when we were in the car, and the state police stopped us, and she was afraid. And this just stunned me at 2 years old, because my mother was the rock of the family. She was bigger than big. And to see my mother cry, I thought only my sister, brother, and I cried, not my mother. And so that was something that kind of stayed with me. And it's one of those things that you then that really opens up for you as you get older and you understand what's going on in the world and what your mother was feeling. So we then headed to Arizona, where for the first time we lived in a house. There was a backyard and a front yard. And when you opened the front door, you were in your front yard, which was, all of this was just new as the horned toads and lizards and snakes that were in our yard. We just loved it all. We became outdoor kids. But I think the best thing was at night, you looked up and this night sky was completely black, but there were stars everywhere. And that was a huge contrast from looking up at a ceiling in a New York projects apartment, and then to see stars just shining above. So eventually we moved because that's the Army life. You pick up and you move. And we moved to California. My father was stationed in Fort Ord, California. And so we lived on base, but we also lived in a neighboring town, Seaside, that was predominant. It was very integrated, but it was predominantly Black, I would say. But we ran around with all the kids, and it was really great for us because our basic job was simply to play. Go outside and play. We'd hear that every day. Go outside and play. And so um, we, there was uh, all kinds of outdoor activity. You didn't have to know the kids. You just, everybody was always looking for another kid to join in and play. And so we did everything from, like every kind of ball game. We went on hikes, camping. There was always some kind of like campfire and marshmallows and ghost stories and treasure hunts and hunting for fossils and those kinds of things. And so we were truly outdoor kids. I attended Highland Elementary School. It was very plain, very simple school. It's one floor. The younger kids were on one side, the older kids on the other. But it was full of activity and just everything you wanted to learn. We had every kind of arts and crafts. We partnered with a family from the Navajo Nation, and they came in and taught us basket weaving. And then we had studies where we would study just maybe one country for a month. My favorite was Japan. We actually wrote letters with our Japanese counterparts. We had sex education in our classroom, a series called The Time of Your Life. There were science fairs, poetry contests, you name it, square dancing. We were doing everything. There was music classes. I played the flute for a while until my mother hocked it, but that's another story. Anyway, but I think one of my favorite places was the library because there were all those books. I didn't have to wait for somebody to feed me a book. I could just go and get my own. And I have to admit, I looked for everything and anything with a Black character, and those were mostly biographies. So the biographies that I read were Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and Jupiter Hammond, and all the usual figures of Black history. I read those not just once, but over and over and over. Well, young librarian who had just come from doing a stint in the Peace Corps had noticed that I was spending all of this time just like reading like these particular books. And so she said, okay, it's time to get you some more books. So she ordered books with like more up-to-date books. There weren't a whole lot, but what she did give me was like giving me the world and giving me myself. There was a story, a series of story about an African girl, a chief's daughter, and it began with 31 brothers and sisters, and then Namusa and the New Magic. But then when it was time for us to pack up and leave, she gave me Harriet the Spy. And so that was, that was something that I treasured. But one more thing about California, so when my sister, brother, and I weren't playing as hard as we possibly could, we would go to our neighborhood park, and we would patrol the park. This is the actual park. We would patrol the park to look out for the little kids. Make sure that the little kids could ride the swings. If the big kids were on it too long, we would go over, and assert ourselves as Cape Crusaders for for good and justice and all of that. Oh my goodness, why we didn't get like beat up, I don't know, but we were just okay, maybe a little too much full of the Green Hornet and Kato and Batman and all of that, but that's who we were. And so it was just time for us to leave, to pack up and leave. And my father had gone to Vietnam and had returned, thank God. And we went to Georgia briefly. And my father was then discharged from service, and we had to return to New York. Well, we returned to New York. So we are these outdoor kids running around, having a good time. And suddenly there was culture shock, just culture shock. We knew nothing about New York. And the first thing that we needed was we needed winter coats. Winter coats, what were those? Not only that, we could not afford winter coats. So my father was having a hard time after being out of the service. And so the family was struggling. We had to live with our grandmother. And a couple of times we went to a center and we had breakfast, courtesy of the Black Panthers. So we went to junior high school 192. Junior high school 192. I don't know if you can actually see this, but over the windows, there's iron grating. Nothing like that we had seen in our schools in California. There were metal detectors. When you walked in, they passed a metal detector over you. There was a policeman inside our building. There was no policeman in Seaside. We had Principal Siebold, and he also had permission to paddle us. Well, this was back in the day, so it was fear of the paddle. So you were basically a good kid. And so this was all one of the other things that some of the things that I noticed in my new school was there was smoking in the stairwells and in the bathrooms, swear words. I say swear words because we weren't allowed to say cussing or cursing. So I was always kind of shocked at the use of all of this swearing in school by both teachers and students. And then there was also the periodic classroom police raid where police would come with the vice principal and they would go through your things because those were the times that we were living in. Well, in my mind, I was surrounded by bad kids. Excuse me. And you got to remember, I was a Cape Crusader in my former life. So this became my worldview, good kids and bad kids. Excuse me one second. But I did have a safe haven. Around the corner from my grandmother's house was the Queen's St. Albans Library. And this is where I went after school. You know, there was no all-day kickball and dodgeball games or, you know, fruit tree raiding or anything like that. We came home, we did our homework and we read books, and we watched Star Trek and the Mets. So going to the library was quite a big thing for me. And I found the writing reference section, which I thought, oh my goodness, they made this just for me. And so I would check out books like the Writer's Market, the Writer's Handbook, and I would study those books. Thank goodness the librarian was so observant. And then at one point she said, well, you're going to have to share those books with the other patrons. Oh my goodness, really? I thought they were put here for me. So I made sure that I made notes. I kept a little book about how to break into publishing and how to submit a manuscript, all of these things. So, because I was getting ready, why should I wait to become a writer? I was a writer. So I began writing my first serious novel in the 7th grade. Now, um, I'm going to tell you, I have opened these, and I understood why my mother used these notebooks for kindling during the period that we just could not afford heat. There's nothing really share worthy in these notebooks, but I wrote, and I wrote faithfully. But it's not a good sign that a 7th grader is writing like 1,000 pages about missing her life as a 4th, 5th, and 6th grader. But it was really more that I think my values had been turned upside down, and I didn't understand what quite was right and what was wrong. So I dove into my novel writing, and I would write 500 words every night, because after I read those books, I realized, okay, you get paid by the word. So I knew I would have to be able to like really churn out some words. So so as much as like I was into the storytelling, the writing of the story, and all of that, the word count meant everything. But it also, it wasn't good writing, but it was important writing, because I was working my muscles, and I was learning that yes, that there is a well, and that I can do it. I should not fear the blank page. Well, I didn't know what the blank page was. So just being able to do this 500 words every night really set myself up to be able to one day write something, and to write substantially, and to not doubt myself. Oh, I doubt myself. All writers do. But I knew that there was something there. Well, while I was at my during my time at my junior high school, and this is early on, during lunch, a young man was fatally stabbed, 15 years old, 9th grader, at the school. The suspect was 13. And this happened on the handball court. And I remember we were all herded back into the building, and dropped down. They had these huge drop down kind of I guess fences or cages. They came down from the ceiling and down to the floor, and you had to stay in your classrooms. And the one thing that I noticed, that while all of this was going on, the seemingly tough bad kids were frightened. And this really, really amazed me. And so, but I was kind of I was energized, because something was happening, and I had paper and pen, and I started writing a story after the bell rang. Well, there was something that happened to me, I think, even beyond the wow, this is a story, but that it was so close, and that it deeply affected people. And so then the things that I wrote began to change. So I began to try to reach more, and to try to understand more, and to sort of think, good versus bad. Are people simply good versus bad? No, they're not. They're more than that. I'm starting to notice that. And then, I was like, the writing still like had a long way to go, but I was stretching, reaching for something, trying to write something more meaningful and truthful, something real. And I think that would inform my desire to write realistic fiction much later. So while I was in college, I took writing courses and dance courses and psychology. I took everything I could, basically. But I also had a job and I worked in the mall. And I remember, for those of you who might not be familiar, these are actually pinball machines, pinball wizards, pinball machines. So I had this job. And I was on my break, and I was sitting down in the mall, and I watched this mother and son. They were white, walking toward where the arcade, the games were, and the boy saw his game that he wanted to play, and he went running to the game. At the same time, there was this black kid. He was a little like further back, and he was kind of strolling up toward where the games were, and that was probably the game that he wanted to play too. But he saw the other kid had the game. It was cool. He was just going to wait. But then the boy's mother said, "Let him play. Let him have the game." And I looked, and her son was angry. And then the other kid, he was kind of confused, like, what? Um, and so while one boy stepped away, the other kind of sheepishly put his quarter in. He completely scratched the game, and then kind of ran away. And so I could see that the mother really wanted to do something. She wanted to show her son something. She wanted to do something, but she was trying to kind of right a historic wrong at the expense of her son. And I knew I was looking at more than a disappointment between of a child and a confusion of the other child. That I was seeing something a little bit bigger than that. I was seeing how attitudes can form. And I thought about that, and it kind of really stayed with me. And I thought, this is that there are so many of the stories that are underneath or behind a person's actions. There are things that inform who they are and how they get to be that way. And so I kind of tuck that away to really help me build what character making would be for me. So, I'm just trying to understand um, um, that human behavior, and that it just doesn't break down to black and white and good and bad and those kinds of simple tropes. And that's what I kind of wanted to get at as a writer, and to not just do the Cape Crusaders story, but to really get at the heart of someone that we might have to struggle to understand, because they might not always represent themselves in the ways that that would make them more sympathetic, as we tend to say in stories. So my first novel, I actually I wrote that first draft in college, and it was about a girl trying to navigate the world of high school dance, and being a kind of a voluptuous teen, while men and boys kind of objectified her. And and her personality, she's not always the a sympathetic personality, but my hope was that you root for her anyway. Then I went on to my second novel about a young man, fast talk on a slow track, about a kid who was at the top of his game in his school in a less advantaged privileged neighborhood. And now all of a sudden he was at Princeton over the summer doing like a prep program. And then he, finds out that he's not all that he thinks he is. And so he has to eventually face himself, and can he handle failure? And what would he do in the face of failure? And so I thought, let me write about something just maybe a little bit more complex, that young Black men struggle through, other than just basketball and drugs and gang and those kinds of things. Um, I then um, I then wrote about a 14-year-old teen mother who was yet pregnant again and in need of intervention, although, of course, she does not think so. I enjoyed writing that character because she resisted help at every turn, but boy, was she in need of it, and also in need of knowing that she could give help. Jumped was then, I wrote Jump much later, about one girl who knows that another girl is going to beat up a third girl by the end of the day. And so my hope was to challenge the reader in terms of who would they feel sympathy for, and or if they didn't feel sympathy at all, but to really to not direct the reader's feelings, but to challenge them to kind of parse out their own feelings. And then there is my little boy, Clayton Bird. Clayton is not a teen. He's like 11 years old or maybe 10, but he is angry. And that's mainly because he was not allowed to properly grieve his beloved grandfather. And so he acts, he goes underground. He puts himself in danger at every turn. And then, of course, I think we all know One Crazy Summer. I like I like both covers, but I like this old cover. I think it's because it's the first one that I saw. And so this story at its heart, it's about three girls with the Black Panthers and the 1960s in the background. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of go back to my own childhood. Not that this was my experience, but I knew of this world. I was there while that was happening. But actually, the real, I think what I found most fascinating in writing this story was the figure that also hovers in the background and looms very large, and it is the figure of the character of the mother, who why is she the way she is? Why would she leave them? This time it was important for me to not completely answer the question, because isn't that the way life is? People aren't always so easily summed up. We don't always get to understand everything about someone, especially our parents. Well, the question of why is, it also kind of loomed large in the next book that I would write. A Sitting in St. James. This is my most recent novel. It will come out in May of 2021. But it came to me because from different sorts of inspirations. But what pushed me to write it was a young Black boy who asked why. Why do they want to kill us? Why do they hate us? And I did give him an answer, but then I knew that I needed to give more of an answer. And so what I did was I went back to the source. I went back to a period of a period of Holocaust for African Americans, the slave period. and so, but instead of following enslaved people as which would feel natural to me, as I come from enslaved people and had a close relationship with a grandmother who was raised by enslaved people. But instead, I focused on a slave holding family. That way, I would begin to see something perhaps that I didn't see before. Okay, election 2012. No, that's not a mistake. It just reminded me of a period when my candidate had been re-elected, and I was filled with so much joy. I happened to be traveling at that time. I went to a library sponsored event in Wisconsin, and the streets were jubilant and all of that. But I always want to consider what must it be like to be on the other side when your candidate does not win. And so I remember I thought about that briefly, and then I put that out of my head. And then for some strange reason, I was revisited by that thought, what it was like to be on the other side when your candidate does not win. I just love this book by Jacqueline Woodson, The Other Side. Someday somebody's going to come along and knock this old fence down. And he said, and I nodded, yeah, someday. There's a reason why we keep telling these stories of the other side, because there's more, there's always another side. There's always multifaceted sides that we have, that the only entree that we can have is through books. And I'm just so proud to hopefully write those kinds of books that that might provide some kind of perspective. And I'm just so honored to be cited and singled out by New York YSS of the New York Library Association, because you all do pretty much everything. I know that your theme was the core of strengthening the core, but I always think core like heart, and courage, and that you all do connect on so many levels, and that you are essentially in practically so many ways the heart of community, and that you have this network. And so when systems break down, we do need our libraries. And I'm just so glad that I have books that are shelved on your libraries. So I will now open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. That was so inspiring. So as I said before, if you want to, let me actually, never mind. So if you want to ask a question, turn on your video and then I will unmute you to ask your question or comment.
Crickets.
They're just amazed. Okay, all right, I see some people. All right, I'm gonna ask to unmute Heather first, because you're the first person who's on my screen.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So I wasn't sure if it was on purpose, but the chat is disabled, so that's why no one can write a question in chat. I wanted to say that was a very good presentation, and I was wondering, is there a story that you've always wanted to write that you haven't had the opportunity to write yet?
I think I did that with One Crazy Summer. That was a story that I always wanted to write. I knew, even in college, I knew I wanted to come back to the Black Panther period, but I thought I was going to write for older teens. And then it wasn't until much later that I said, oh no, children were very much a part of this movement, and no one brings up the Black Panthers during Black History Month. So I'm going to not only write it, but I'm going to write it so that it's in schools, in elementary schools, and so that there will be at least that reference point. And then as the readers get older, they can look further into it and see, the contradictions and the advances of and activism of the Black Panther Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much for answering my question.
Sure.
Next up, I have Peter, so I'm going to unmute you.
So, not so much a question, but a comment. Thank you very much for your talk. It was very nice. And you in your talk, you basically illustrated a bit about seeing things from another perspective, because I've also lived in Southern Arizona and, well, Santa Cruz, so not too far from where Fort Ord was. And you having, talked about it, you have a different perspective, and it was nice to see that, familiar places through other eyes. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad I got the chance to see a little bit more of the country, and to know that there's something more than what I'm used to. A lot of people don't get a chance to go outside. The first time I saw Native Americans was as we were traveling from New York to Arizona, and I saw these very reddish brown people with long black hair, turquoise, the denim skirts, and and cotton shirts, and I asked my mother, who were they? And she said, Indians. And I thought, oh, my mother doesn't know. That's not right. Because Indians, to me, were on horses and had war bonnets, and, whatever we saw on TV, that was my reality. And so that just, like, how could my mother knows everything? How could she get that wrong?
I'm going to unmute Alyssa next.
Okay. Hi, Rita. Thank you so much.
Hello.
I'm a teen librarian, and I, at times, have kids come in who are very interested in writing, and we're always brainstorming like different programs we can provide. So not only like a written resource for support, but how could we provide a program for them that they could come in and share? And we've done some different writing workshops and different things. And I thought, if you could think back to that time when you were coming to the library, if there was a program that you could have attended that might have been inspiring or helpful to you, what might it have been?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the honest truth. My writing was my own thing. I didn't want anybody to I didn't want to be taught. I didn't want to write with anybody. It was my own little escape thing. But I also recognized that, I was just a little nerd Nick. I was just my own little separatist self. And just from venturing out into the world, I see that a lot of kids like to collaborate. They are far more mature than I ever was. They are better at the sharing. And so when everybody kind of comes together and have a part, because some might be stronger in illustrating, some might be stronger in decide like the story, the plotting, but maybe the particulars really like escape them and all of that. So that getting together and having writing meetings, brainstorming, sketching, the thing that I like to do when I'm making a story, when I'm thinking about my story and everything that's going to be in it, I do one or two things. I make a map of the character's journey, where they start, And then you see where the other characters come in. And then what happens, what the interaction is, and then what is the result. So kind of like map making really helps. I think kids really do like to collaborate. And then I really like sketching characters in different ways. And one of the ways that I do that is through collages. I love collages. And so I'll like get all, like I can Google all these different images and cut them out, I'll print them and cut them out. And then like, how does this tell the story? By what I cut out, I see what I think is the important part of the story, in ways that if I just sat down and tried to like write the story, I might miss that, you know. So anything that can be hands-on-ish and possibly sharing to just to get the minds to percolate, to open, you know, and all of that. Like I said, a lot of that writing that I did, I have like 50 notebooks. Thank goodness my mother burned half of it. None of that stuff is just, oh my goodness. Oh, please don't let anybody find it. But it was that I was actively doing it, actively taking on one part of it. And I think that is the main thing, you know. And no, they don't have to write 500 words and, you know, a paragraph a day is pretty darn good. If you do it consistent, a paragraph a day is pretty good.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Thank you all for your amazing questions, but thank you most of all to Rita for joining us virtually for an amazing presentation. I can't wait to read your latest book. I can't believe we have to wait until May for it to come out, but I will do my part. I will wait as impatiently as I am, but I will wait.
Yes.
We are honored, so honored to have you share your journey with us. It's so inspiring to hear you speak and to have you to share everything, because it's been a true honor. So thank you. I am clearly at a loss for words here because this has been so moving. And to our fellow YSS members here, thank you for joining. We are just about at time, so I do want to take this time to again remind you that for all of the things that you need related to YSS, please again venture to the website. If you have nominations for 2022, please submit them through the online form. That is the best way to have your voice heard. If you have a New York State author or illustrator who has contributed a significant body of work to the literature for young people. And something else that will be coming in the spring is the announcement of the 2021 winner. So stay tuned, lots of good things happening in the spring. And thank you again, Rita. Big snaps, big claps, and thank you. We are so honored to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I am the honored one. I am the one who is truly thrilled to be here with you. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Of your conference, everyone.
Enjoy your conference.